I guess we just jump in and say, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome. My name is Lorne Risley, host of the Halcyon Show. How are you doing? Today, I've come shortchanged and underprepared, but luckily, I don't think I need to be, because the gentleman we're going to be interviewing today is actually a long-term friend of mine, and we have some history. We've got some shit to talk about. But I'm going to throw it to him to introduce himself, because the length and breadth of his career, we're going to discuss at length, because this is a man that deserves a spotlight shone on him because of his quality of work, the perseverance of his artistry, and also the fact that he's just a really top, nice fella. He's also cool. So cool, in fact, I need to demonstrate that I own both a dragon dagger and a white saber sword. So I'm cool, okay? I am cool. Before you see him and decide he's the coolest guy, which he is, I am cool. State your name and rank, sir.
I'm here. What an intro. But yeah, long-time friend of mine. And if I'll introduce yourself, Stat, obviously, I'm Dvious Wiser, artist / part-time artist. I've got to be real. I can't say I'm a full-time artist. I've got to be real for listeners. But yeah, you can check my music account, Dvious Wiser. I'm on Spotify. You can follow me on Instagram. Everything is Dvious Wiser, but Devious without the E. DVIOUSWISER. And like Lauren introduced me then, long-time friend. He knows I've been producing music and recording music since, I don't know, when did I first give you that mixtape? 2008, 7, maybe probably 2007. So a very long time. Also got a group with a good friend of mine called Ricky, Anecdote Authors. That's kind of like the hip-hop, UK hip-hop mostly, but the group we formed. But it goes way back before then, which I'll probably touch on in the interview. But yeah, basic, that's my introduction. I'm here.
So let's bring it back. Let's bring it back, because you and I do go back a very long way. And for people that are going to be shocked to hear this, I was once young. So young, in fact, that I was considered the whippersnapper of the office. Very young man. And I was introduced to Dvious Wiser here through a few mutual acquaintances. And one day, I happened to be sitting at my desk, not working particularly hard, and he noticed me doodling. And he said, so you doodling? And I was like, well, yeah, do you mind taking a run at some designs for me? I said, sure, what have you got in mind? And he proceeded to lay it on me, and that's how we got acquainted. Now, from there, he then introduced me to his music. And I'm a bit of a stickler for quality of content. I don't like things that are popular. I like things that are good, and there is a difference. And I will say he is the first independent music artist I ever met in real life that I genuinely wondered, how are you not somewhere else with all the money and all the women and all the shiny things? Because this is amazing. So maybe we should bring it back to that point. So like you said, it would have been when I was 17 or 18, so maybe 2007, 2008 time. Take us back to sort of leading up to that point where I was introduced to you.
Yeah. So leading up, do you know what? Sometimes when people, I've always thought if I get asked this question, how far do I take it back to actually get people to understand that the influence to actually make the music I was making at that time was probably way back to me being like, I've got to big my brother up, and if he ever watches this, my brother Justin, he had a pair of turntables in the attic, and back then, obviously, we were spinning tunes they were terrible. Well, not terrible, but it was definitely far from hip hop. He wasn't really into hip hop, but I think we had a microphone, so that was like the kind of first time I ever picked up a microphone and heard my voice back. And him being the older brother, I'd sometimes sneak up there when he went back from school, switch the decks on, switch the mic on. But to be honest, I've got to go back before that. When I was in middle school, me and my friend wrote a rap song in our music class, and I'm sure it was called King of the Ring or something. It was probably now, it's one of them cringy moments if someone played that back. I'm glad there wasn't camera phones and things in that era, because it probably would have been cringy. But I think, like you said, the influence came from way before then in terms of music. And then I think by the time I met yourself at that job, and you did some of our artwork, and I was kind of probably giving you some of the music, it was more that I found the kind of sound that I liked doing with a friend and by myself, but more so forming our group, the Anecdote Authors. We really established the sound. And I think one thing you commented on when we gave you the mixtape was that, you know what, you guys don't sound like everybody else, but you don't, but not in a bad way. That was, I think, what most people said And I think, you know, I'm not naive enough to know that the quality of the recordings and stuff like that was probably not great then. It probably weren't the worst, but that's always kind of got better. And but like I say, I was into. I always like to give this thing of like people don't see me as like I was 7, 8 listening to hip hop. I probably wasn't. I was 7, 8 in listening to like Oasis, Blur, and loads of indie bands, and you know the stuff you get fed to you on the TV and the radio. And obviously back then times we were going in HMV and buying CDs. Start going to school. Then friends would introduce me to their music eventually and say like upper school, so years maybe 9, 10, 11. But at that point there, like I say, the run up to that was really me. And probably the best way to explain it as well is a lot of experimenting in music, like not even finding the sound that you, and not even knowing what kind of sound, you know. And like you said there, I think it was a lot of people do say, how are you not like a full-time artist and stuff like that. And I think back in them days, it was very different to like even the marketing process, getting yourself out there. It was like word of mouth back then. It was, you had to turn up, give flyers out, you know, give your mixtape out. So it was very different era. So it's almost, we always say this, me and the olders, we sound like some bitter olders. It's like the younger guys have it too easy. Now you probably think that was some of the podcast stuff and the gaming is like they have it so easy. Like if you ever did something like this back then, it was more like you had to really be out there. Do you know what I mean? Not, you know, on the internet's great because you can push stuff, but I think as well, meeting people and then getting a feel for like what music you do, even meeting yourself and watching you draw. I wouldn't have known that through the internet. You may have told me you draw, but you know what I mean, that essence of seeing it actually, like, wow, like that is amazing, bro. Like we need some artwork. Like what are you doing? So yeah, sorry to go on for
No,
ages.
no, not at
Stop
all.
me if I
Because
talk too long, bro, because I sometimes can talk for ages. I'm
y
not yourself.
you're the reason we're here, my friend. So we got to focus on it. But I want to bring it back to
Yeah.
something because something you
Mm,
said there is quite pertinent. Because again, I stand by my original critique, which is I'm a fan of things that are good. I'm not really a
mm,
fan of things that are popular because if I look at something that's popular and I look at it and I go, but it's crap, and the response is, yeah, but everyone's listening to it, you go, right, but has anyone stopped to think about why they're listening to it? And that's where I come back to proper artists, proper artistry.
mm.
And sometimes it does take a minute for it to properly permeate and properly crystallize. Because you mentioned the original mixtape, and I remember hearing it, and sure, some of the production quality might have been just a little bit off here or there, but that's because it's a learning
Definitely.
process. So let's go back to that sort of those learning curves and that evolution process to where you started, where you grew to where you are now. What have been some of the key moments as you've gone? Because again, we're talking 15, 16,
Mm.
17, 20 years maybe at this point. That's a long time to evolve as an
Yeah.
artist in sometimes
Right. Yeah.
subtle ways, but in sometimes drastic ways.
Yeah. So yeah, good point. I definitely think it was.
I remember the mixtape was so dramatic. It was very
Yeah.
there was an I remember describing it as somewhat epic. Like even though I
Mm.
know that
That's a good
your
word.
scope
Yeah,
wasn't that,
like the
but I
beat.
remember it feeling like, man, there's something
Yeah.
big going on this,
You
man.
know what I probably missed on when I talked before is that a lot of that sound came from. One thing I'll say as I got older, hip hop music is a sample based music, and if it isn't, it's very hard to get the essence of that sound. And people who don't make music might not understand this, but I'm trying to describe it. It's like drum and bass without the bass. You know what I mean? It's just drums, then, isn't it? It's like the whole fact drum and bass is called drum and bass because drums and bass are the backbone of that kind of genre. You know, so with the hip hop I was making back then, a lot of the samples were movie based samples, and I'm a bit of a movie nerd. So back in the day, we probably grew up on loads of the same movies. So I'm sitting there sampling. I think one of the first beats they ever made that captured people's attention in like the local area was, I don't know if you ever watched this film, but it's called Last of the Mohicans. And there's a soundtrack in that, and I laced just the hip, like I said, with the sampling. With hip hop, that sample is like the backbone of that song. So once you lace a beat to it, the sample's done so much work because the music, and plus, like you said, the word epic. I think I liked a lot of movies where the music was very epic, very cold. A lot of people used to say your beats are cold, like Cold War sounding. I was like, make something light-hearted or like it doesn't sound like it's graveyard. But I think this is one thing I've realised later is that the mind, when you make a beat, the mind frame you're in is kind of what ends up happening when you kind of approach the production. So you're already kind of in a mind frame when I've sat down. And I think it's not to sound like all artistry comes from pain, but a lot of it actually does. And then the sounds can end up birthing really dark sounds. And, you know, Ricky, Arcane is artist name, but he always was a very kind of dark rapper. If you heard his verses on chapter 1, like the mixtape you got, the verses were always quite like, and we always called it anecdote authors because I love the word anecdote. I probably didn't even know what the word an anecdote was. It's not a word that gets used and thrown about a lot. So that's one reason I chose that word for the group, and the fact that it was like you had to work something out in the lyrics. It wasn't so just, you know, like you said earlier with a lot of popular stuff, it's already, you're listening and kind of already getting what the song's about.
I think they get the head start with things, by the way. Sorry to jump in, but I think with popular stuff, they get their cues from what's already going on. You're trying to generate stuff that's new. There's a song of yours from back in the day that I remember. I think it was called either As It Falls or As the Rain Falls. I forget exactly what that was the one.
That's it.
And I remember, because I remember distinctly getting, again, that sort of machine-esque, not a violence, but a sense of unease as the track builds, rain in the very nuanced the background. It's like, this is not like other things I hear, and it's great. Not because it's just different, but because it's different and it doesn't sound like anything else, and it's been done with a certain degree of inspiration that's carried through in execution that feels genuine. So I think that's, you raised the point there, but like that's the problem I have with popular music, is that it's sometimes interpreted by people that don't fully understand the cultural relevance or significance that they're referencing. They just know that it's on people's lips and minds, and they want to kind of jump on it in effect.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you say that, because I feel like pop, I think when I was younger, you used to call it pop music, but you didn't realise that pop just standed short for popular music. So it's like you nailed it there with what you said, is that when talking points, and not so much talking points, but I know certain MCs even now who are younger than me who will reference, you know, like say for the COVID pandemic, to put a COVID, say, lyric in your bars at that time, or even now, COVID was a worldwide, like everywhere thing. So it's like you have to know what someone's talking about, which again is sometimes I've found with writing songs, sometimes I almost want to make people, I think the word we use is some songs we dumb it down because it is more of a structure where I want everyone to get it. Like your mum can listen to it, your nan, you know, not like stereotyping them people that they wouldn't get. But hip hop used to be a genre that the lyrics, and I think if you even go back, the lyrics in hip hop always come from the oppressed kind of like society. It was always like a story of like what's wrong with society. And I think they knew that if your voice was a powerful voice, you're a waste to not talk about the problems, because if everyone listens to you, and another word is conscious, that means that you're conscious of the world or things going on. Where, you know, like people, I don't know if you ever heard that expression, but they'd be like, "Nah, I don't really like that guy, he's a conscious rapper." And then it's almost like you feel like, that isn't conscious being aware of loads of things in the world, not just like what's going on in the area. But like you said, I think, you know, I've learned to appreciate music that is not really left to look like working out. And I think esoteric, is that the word? A lot of esoteric stuff, you know, if anyone knows what that means. But my friend used to always say that. He's like, we're very esoteric.
Man's stealing my gimmick here. I'm the one that says long words here, motherfucker. You can't come in here and use esoteric like it's fucking nothing.
You know why I like using these words to do that?
Hypermonstrous equiptiliophobia and anti-establishmentarianism. There, I have established my dominance at the top of the verbal pecking order here. I just can't rhyme them together. Sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I think no, that's funny, because I actually I know from watching some of your interviews, and even back when we first met, you were coming out with words. I was sitting there thinking, what is this guy talking about? Not in a bad way.
Coming out with
words. This guy's he's coming out with words. Like you should be a rapper, because I always say, it's funny, like you say that actually, because you would probably make an incredible rapper if you worked on everything other than words. You know why though? Because it's like a soldier with like, this guy's got 10 bullets and this guy's got 10,000. that's like in rap words. And I think if I go to, you know, some of my old friends don't agree with me when I say Eminem was one of the best with putting words together. Like whether you think he's a good rapper or them type of things, but when you really strip all the other things other than finding really good words, and also not just finding good words, but words that rhyme together, Eminem was the, you know, I'm not going to call him a god because I think that whole rap god thing is a bit strange to me, but the way he was with it, and don't get me wrong, he's not the only one. There's loads of old rappers who were really good with words, but you know, like one thing I'll touch on as well is that I think even like you might look at these boxes as a podcaster, and I think there's not just one box you tick to make you a good podcaster. You might have a few boxes that get ticked, and it's the same with artists and rappers. I think someone might have really good lyrics, but on the mic they just don't deliver really great. Someone might be a great delivery and presence on the mic, but they just haven't got any great lyrics. So and that can come down to opinion based stuff, but I think yeah, we've always kind of thrived on making the lyrics, you know, finding not going for the first word that comes in my head, which sometimes for an artist is almost you're paying yourself because you're really saying no, that word's not good enough. You know what I mean? You need a better word. And I think, like you said earlier, that's what determines sometimes people, the genuineness in music, where you can hear people really gone to the extent to write that lyric. It's really troubled their brain. Like Eminem, sometimes this is some of their old lyrics, and I was like, how did this guy must have had a headache like for days after writing that, because it's just like, how has he found them type of words and bind them like that? So
Is there a particular song or a particular part of an album process that you really remember, like you say, really wrestling with because you wanted it to be great, maybe struggled, gone backwards and forwards,
yeah,
and then been
definitely.
really satisfied with the result because of that, and also because it matched or exceeded the vision that you had for it originally?
Yeah, I think the first EP I dropped solo, which was probably 2018. This was the first EP I actually produced from scratch, recorded myself. My friend did mix it, but going back to your point, there was a track on there called Tribal, and I did this really quick lyric. I'll call it more double time when you're really quick. And there was one part in it where I knew that when I went onto that microphone, the breath I took didn't complement the lyric enough. So I was in my friend's house when I remember this day, and I was doing the take about 10 times, and he was like, he knows me, so he goes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and he's like, you ain't got it yet. And this is like the pain of acts. You can be going again, oh, messing up on that word, all right, record again, and you could be like 30, 50, 100 times into one take. But I knew, like you said with that one, I knew I had to get that exactly right for it to resonate differently when people heard it on the track. So I've probably had it a lot of times, but being specific, that's one track I remember where I said, this lyric I have to get out quickly, and it had to go on the pattern that was in my head. Because like we go back to, everything starts with, I think, with that imagination in your head. It all starts there. A lot of artists will say, I write the first two lines, but then after that, I can't even tell you what writes the rest of my lyrics. You dive it sounds like a bit like crazy to people, but I do feel like you go into a space where like you're not really thinking. It just either comes, and I think it comes from somewhere that's not even me sometimes, like whether people call it the ether or whatever, something feeds that energy of a creative person that they won't be able to explain to you. And they'll only explain the first part, that the mind frame they got into to channel it. You know, like someone wants to raise some spirits, they get into certain practices. It's like the artist gets into their mind frames, and the track almost ends up writing itself. I think they're the best tracks where the track, that's what I kind of call it, is it wrote itself in the end. I don't even know if it was me.
No,
Let me quick though, just to
no,
cut
by
you,
all
because I
means.
just want to pull this up because you probably can't see it too good
Oh
on
man,
here.
he's doing this now, isn't he?
But this is the actual print. Yeah, this is the print that Mr. Risley did on.
So if you hold it over yourself, the way it's censoring out the background. So if you hold it over yourself, I
It's
think
got
you.
a black T-shirt on as
There you
well.
go. No,
Actually,
no, no, that works because it's not because it thinks it's part of the back. Oh no, there you go. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know
So
why I'm helping you.
it's
This is
character.
embarrassing.
This was the first design. I've still got that. I've got all the rest, but I won't be like pulling each one up here because it will be like, I'll actually when I come see you, or we go get a coffee or something, I'm going to bring all them for you. And I've got a place I can photocopy it for. So.
Oh God bless you. God bless
But
you.
yeah,
Well,
sorry to cut you off.
no, no,
I just
no,
had
by
to.
all means, because again, right, check that off. Because like you said, like it's as an again, I'll show you two. There's two things ubiquitous with all great artists or good artists.
Mm.
Every single one of them, you pay them a compliment, will always say something approaching, well, thank you, but I don't think I'm really
Yeah.
worthy of that kind of
Yeah,
praise.
yeah, that's
You know.
exactly. Do you know what you saying that? Yeah, sorry to cut you, but that is exactly sometimes how I feel.
Yep.
Yeah,
And then
you
the really bad ones for that particular frame of mind can't
mm,
look at their own artistry objectively once it's done. They almost want to forget it exists because it's like,
yeah,
if I look at it, I'm going to look at all the things I didn't do, all the things I could have
yeah.
done better, and all the things that I fucked up, but only I know I fucked up. And the people that see it go, but I love it. I think it's great. But then
Well,
you go, but it's my baby. I know.
yeah.
I saw it born and I saw it raised.
You
You
know
don't
what I
know what
want
it
to
could have
say?
been.
What you're saying there is you are someone where you don't do music, but you are in that world with your drawing. And I know from your and how you draw, you are definitely in that world. Like I say, and I don't think that is just music artists. It's any creative kind of hobby, whatever you want to call it, someone does. Everybody, every one of them, whether they like it or not, are all in the same world when it comes to them things. Like you said there, I might show you these and you're like, God, I could have got that hood, like a bit or whatever. Where was I going with that? But that's what makes you so good at it as well. I've got to be honest, because like you said, then I think it's a Jimi Hendrix interview. Have you ever seen that one when he says, "Oh, you've got all this stuff now, and you know you're a really good artist, and everyone respects you." And he goes, "Yeah," but he goes, "That's sometimes what gets to an artist's head, and then the stuff
Right.
they make after that, it's like because you've said I'm the man, so." And sometimes what comes with great art is not being the man and trying to be the man, and the struggle of like trying to be. You might have been, just not out there with whatever you create, and you're trying to get there. And I think sometimes the beauty in art comes from that place. And this is why you sometimes see a lot of old rappers in hip hop who probably, got some of the money and got the deals and cars and stuff like this and whatever. And then you start to see the artistry, like the albums, the next album. And I think you hear rappers say it all the time. You can never recreate that moment, sometimes all the time. But you can dive into the same energy, though. That's the only way I've figured out how to like. It's not robotic. It's not a machine, is it? That's working. It's not a factory, so you can't manufacture the same product again and again and again. It has to. You might get into the same field and create something great, but you will never get the same product all the time. And I think that's one thing as an artist you've got to face. You might have had it with a drawing you did great one day, and you just think, what did I do that day? You don't even know, or you might, So
No,
yeah,
I completely agree. One of
it's
the
a
things,
special
because
place. You're in that world. You're in that world.
well, you make a point there, and I want to put this to you because this would be an interesting. It's a slightly different question than what I was going to ask you, because one of the things you've touched on there is the ability to be able to recapture a zeitgeist of sorts. Like,
That's it.
some people don't ever reach zeitgeist status when it comes to worldwide, and that's
Yeah,
fair. Most people won't, but some people can capture a certain zeitgeist. And I think one of the problems is that you kind of hit the nail on the head. Whenever they try to recapture it, they forget what they actually did in the first place, which is that they offered their audience something new or
yeah,
something relevant. And when they go back to the world's moved on. The well's back there. You've gone back, and now you're trying to catch up, and
yeah,
you never will. So one of the things that I found is that even people who are older can recapture the zeitgeist, but it's only ever if they're offering something new or offering something relevant, and there's a degree of adaptability. And even then, it's rare. So my question to you
mm,
is, again, you've been doing it a while. This isn't something
mm,
that you picked up 2 months ago, and I'm like, oh, I want to talk to Venezi because he's done something, and I want to see how he's getting on. You've been
mm.
doing it a long time, so what do you think you have done over that period of time to adapt as an artist to what you want to say and what you want to do and what you find inspiration in versus what you believe an audience might need or want, depending on what you're
Yeah,
trying to serve up at the time?
yeah. I think there's been occasions where I have swayed more to the side of doing, my head has been in what the audience want. And I have made songs like that. I've got to be honest. I have made songs like that, and they wasn't bad songs. And like you just touched on, then the audience. I noticed when my head went into more of a song, to call it, like chorus, kind of catchy chorus, dumb down the lyrics a bit, talk about some girls. That's always a winner, because a lot of people say that it's not only men who listen to music. So a lot of rap, sometimes people are stereotyped. Girls don't listen to hip hop, like you spitting some crazy lyrics. It's not really a song, so to speak, to them. But yeah, so I've done that a few times, and I've made good songs, but I've got to be really honest. And I think in the question, you kind of already kind of got the answer. It's like the headspace. There's two headspaces sometimes in that kind of world. There's in world. You go into one headspace where it's like you've done so much of your own stuff, it doesn't get anywhere, and everyone around you can be telling you need to change your sound. You need to make a song about something more relevant. You need to your beats sound all like really dark and da 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 da. But then, getting older, one thing as well is that as I've got older, I'll put this in a lyric. As I've aged, my music's evolved. Like the content has evolved, even in the like we say, the concepts. The kind of things I've touched on in music, and I've almost felt as I've got older, I could never dumb it down again, because it's almost like I feel like I have a duty to the listeners that sometimes tell me the reason I hit your music is to get something that I don't get when I press the radio. You know what I mean? So it's like if I'm feeding them radio music, that means that they don't. A lot of my actual core fans, and I don't have a massive fan base that I'm aware of. Sometimes my streams pop up and they're in like places like Japan, and I'm thinking, who's streaming my music in Japan? Some guy out there's getting down to some Dvious Wiser in his car, whatever. But
Konnichiwa to the Dvious Wiser fans out there.
yeah, big up to the. Yeah, actually, this is a good going on a different platform, which I don't do often. This is a good chance. Yeah, big up all the listeners from around the world, because it does pop up. You see some crazy places that your music's played. But yeah. Like going back to the question though, yeah. So that headspace I've dived into when the audience has ended up making me, not even making me, but I've just probably, that word experimenting as well. Sometimes people are scared to experiment to get, like someone said the word in music, you're selling out, you're a sellout, you've made a pop song, you're a sellout, mate. That sometimes is just because, in this day and age as well, music is a revenue based. Look. Rap music and hip hop, people might actually not think they're two different things, but the rap music is something almost like the word grime they gave to the UK music wasn't made. Hip hop represents something very different to rap music, and I think industry is a whole world in itself. If you're looking to get into the industry, that head of diving into the audience more, you probably will have to. You definitely will have to, because like you said then earlier, with someone saying, popular music, that is what they're. If that's what's got to get on, and you need to get on, you're gonna have to make something that gets through to the radio. Even some people will say radio music, which I find strange, because music's music. But how do we call it? Oh, that's a radio song. You understand? It's like, where does that phrase even come from? That's a radio song. So, yeah, I've dived into both headspace, but I think as I've got older and music's evolved, I've definitely I've come way back more so to the original sound. And it's almost like, like you could draw, you might tell me there was this way you drawing pictures and you went through all these processes, but you went straight back to your old route of how you got drawings done, as in like, you just can't beat it.
I want to talk about, because that not pressure to conform, that's too strong a word, but I would say the thing of why don't you just. So again, for full context, my most successful video was a 2-minute video I made in about 2 hours, parodying someone else's channel, and it got 35,000 views. Hooray for me, right?
Yeah.
Well, hooray for me and everything, but here's the thing. I did that kind of as a joke, kind of like, this is just something I've been saying to myself in the fucking shower for about a year, so fuck it, let's just fuck around, right? And I know what people would say, which is, oh, you want to be a successful YouTuber, then just do that. And you go, right, but here's the thing, I was kind of humouring you with that. That's me being immature. that's not what I want to make. Neither is it what I think I'm particularly good at making. I made it more as, like you say, an experiment, a thought process to go, I wonder what it would be like to make this dumb little thing. And you make it. And one of the lessons that I learned from it, and this is where we come to a question for yourself, is I've learned to not get mad at what the audience wants. It's a hard lesson to learn because you kind of go, like, but I worked really hard on this thing. It's objectively good. It's what you should want because I think that it addresses a lot of things that could be beneficial to you. But then you get fired back with something that approaches, yeah, but. And you go, okay, fine, I'll humor you. So my question to you is, how do you balance that? As an artist and as a writer, performer, producer, editor, everything that you have to do to make your artistry work.
Yeah, do you mean more like them posing, like you say, that example of that video you did, them someone posing that question, like how do you balance?
Well, I guess more in the sense of how do you, because no one, again, I know that some people do it just for the love, but all of us would love that kudos of, I did a good. Like, people like what I do, but then you don't want that imposter syndrome of they like something that I do that I don't like doing.
Don't like doing. That's
so how do you balance that? Because you've got to give the audience what they want and a little bit of what they need, but then you also have to think about your needs and wants as an artist. How do you find yourself balancing that, or do you just negate it entirely?
I would say once, because you know, before you put a video out, this is I see a guy say this in a talk he was giving. He said in music, he says the player is the first listener, and you could say with that video you made, you were the first viewer, even though you made it. You would have, when you finish your edit, you would have watched it back. So you were the first viewer, weren't you? Like if I'm making music in my room, I'm actually the first listener, even though I've created it. So I just feel the balance is. I think that's sometimes to each person trying to balance that, but I think you've just got to try at least to balance that a little bit. If you're not balancing that at all, then you might end up falling down the rabbit hole of that, all the content you start. And one thing, like you nailed there, is life's about being in the moment. So if someone told me for 10 hours a day I don't enjoy the creating part, and then when I put it out, I'm just going to enjoy all the likes and the views and like you say, it's life's about enjoying, you know, is that reward is that if you didn't really enjoy that time spent, is that reward justified for that time? And I think you've got to ask yourself that question.
And so that's the question I would ask you, because again, man, the allure is there, man. I get it, I really do. I'll share another story with you. I despise the short format. I fucking hate it with a passion. I think it makes fucking zombies out of people. I touched
on that on an old video the other day. The shorts on YouTube.
I get shot down for it all the time because it's just, hey man, go back to 1991 when MTV was a thing and you'd fit right in there too, bitch. I'm like, it's not the same. But anyway, I'm deviating a little bit from my point. I made shorts. I made some. And I almost made them to hope that they didn't do well so I could prove my point. And no, they all got fucking views. And I'm like, no! I mean, yes, I'm successful now, which is not successful, sorry, but the videos did well, which is lovely. But you fucking undermined my point because it's something that I made hoping that it would prove my point that no, what you want is the stuff I make well, rather than the stuff I kind of slap together and throw at you and say, here, peasants. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you do? Because again, the pull to do something more. Hey, just follow these instructions. You'll do just fine. And you go, yeah, but I don't. This isn't me. This isn't what I do. How do you reconcile that and still maintain that conviction that what you do is going to pan into something? Because I know you believe that. Because again, that's another thing with all artists. We do genuinely believe that it just takes that one opportunity and we're there. But it's just about finding that opportunity and being lucky enough, i.e. making enough opportunities to get that one shot to really show it to someone that says, man, where the fuck have you been hiding?
Yeah. I think, like you said, with even that example you give, making the shorts, I bet that wasn't as much time taken to make like what we're doing now, or like when we do regular videos.
It was significantly easier, yes.
Easier, yeah. So I think, that if that was opposed to like my music, I've got to be. It's so funny, this, isn't it? That the similarities in what we're saying. When I made them shoot songs for like that were more songs and catchy choruses, I made them quicker than I make, like you say, with your short. So, and I'm not saying that just because it's a short video. That's, it's stating itself. It's obviously a shorter video, so the span of the video someone's watching is a lot shorter. So the creative time spent on it may not be as much, but yeah, I just don't really listen to what other people say. Do you know the answer to that is I don't really listen to what other people say. That is the shortest answer. Is don't listen, because you'll have that voice in your own head that is talking to you most times. So I think don't listen too much, but then at the same time, I think you touched on it earlier, I think it is good to engage with your audience, especially in this era, you know what I mean? And I do believe engaging with your audience can kind of give you a sense of gratitude towards that time spent as well. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh, okay, that's and you might, but yeah, I just don't really listen to people too much. But like for you, let me pose you that question. So with that video, like you say, that one that got quite a lot of hits, and it was just a parody. It's almost like, I think I watched a bit of it, so it's not you in the video. It's just kind of like the talking. Was it like voiceovers and stuff like that? Yeah. So like you say, was that premeditated by you a lot before you created that, or was that, like you say, very short in terms of the actual?
That was almost all instinctual. So I did another one similar to that, where it was there's an MMA pundit / ex-fighter called Chael Sonnen, and I'm not great at impressions in the sense of mimicking a voice, but I am pretty good at picking up people's mannerisms, because it's part of just me. It's how I size people up. It's how I decide, you're a dickhead, you're not, you're all right, you're not. And
of course, body language.
And part of it is also in the pattern of speech. Like people reveal a lot in the way they talk, not necessarily in what they say. They can be of few words, but like I was just fucking around almost. Like just wouldn't it be stupid if I said this? Wouldn't it be dumb if I did that? And it makes me laugh. And to your point, like as being the first viewer of it, I never anticipated, because I figured everyone would do what they do, which is they'd see it doesn't have very many views, they'd watch the first 5 seconds, oh, this is an idiot, and turn off. But they don't. They go, yeah, it's just like that. And you go, man, this took me all of fucking 10. I just set the thing and I press record. Like, do you not want more effort than that? Like, I have questions here. I prepped for this. It doesn't. It takes a lot of work to look this casual.
Definitely. I love that. And I think, like you said then, is that the time creating is actually enjoyable if you're doing something you like doing, isn't it? So Agreed. It could have took longer to do a different video, but if you said you enjoyed that interview, or you really had good stuff, I do think that's what it's about for the artist. And I think after a long time of doing minimal, you could even post some of the really top selling artists,
12 seconds later.
Tell me about producing music in a more individualistic sense, because one of the things that I think people don't understand about the process of making music, given that it's a fairly socially enjoyed medium, it's not something that people tend to, they listen to it in clubs, they listen to it when they're out and about, but they don't consider the insular nature of making music. Talk to me about what it's like when you sit down and you start to work. How do you get your inspiration? How do you channel that into something? How do you maintain motivation? And how do you kind of mold things? You mentioned that you sometimes go into a bit of an ether process, but how do you focus it into something that crystallizes and starts to take shape as it goes?
Yeah, good question. I think the beat side, so making the beat, may be more of like, I'm not thinking too much, I've just gone on for a bit of fun, I'm playing around with sounds. That being said, you might be feeling a certain emotion that day, what's drawn you to sounds more than others. But I wouldn't say that I've always gone, I feel really angry today. So when I've gone to make the beats ended up sounded angry. But that can be a part. So I think the beat making sometimes can be a bit like you were saying about that video, a bit of an idea earlier in the day. of a sound I'd want to use, or I've heard another song and say the strings in it. Oh, I want to make a song later with strings. Sometimes inspiration can be as simple as that. You might have watched a movie the night before, and it could be, you know, like I say, I was a bit of a movie nerd. Some of the best soundtracks. I mean, some of the later films were terrible. Don't want to go out there and everyone start attacking me, but I think back in them years, I think Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it was the one. I can't remember what the actual movie, which one it was, but there was a certain bit in that where the girl was singing like this type of like kind of melodic singing.
Okay.
And like you said there about inspiration can come, you know, do you know their movies? I think you like movies, don't you?
I do.
know you
I've seen all of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Yeah,
I think
Caribbean.
as far as singing part, I remember there
The
was
one
something
where
with
his
a
dad
third
was
one.
like some gooey kind of like fishy like
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
guy. Yeah, I'm sure it was that one. Dead Man. I don't know what it's called, but there was a part where the girl was singing, and like you said about little parts of inspiration. Sometimes it could be something as small as that. It's like you're playing a game, and then the game music inspires you to make a beat. You know, sometimes I could be watching, but then the reason I want to separate them two things is because production and like writing lyrics, songwriting, sometimes are two different heads on. Do you understand?
Right,
So
right.
the beat making might be a little inspiration from something, or it could be just playing about, and then you've made something and been like, oh, that's good, and just kept on it. But the lyric writing is more of a, you know, like if someone gave, what's the best way to put it? If someone gave you a horror movie without the music, and then said to you, what music do you think will go on? And they showed you the movie. That's a bit like lyric writing, is the beat will determine the lyric, the kind of way I approach the lyrics. So not in terms of what I'm saying, but even the tone and the key I'll probably use to do certain words in will be very specific to the beat. So if it's a dark beat, this probably to artists it will sound obvious, but if it's a dark beat, most of the time it's dark lyrics. So that's really the nature for me where it springs from. That's like the canvas is the beat. It will be a blank canvas, then it turns into something where the lyrics need to fit onto the beat. I mean, that's really specific to hip hop and rap, but I think most terms of music that's got vocals, it's the same. Yeah.
In that case, then, how do you hone your craft? How do you discern what you could do better on another track or on another album or just line for line? Is there an internal critique process? Is it something that you tend to seek out criticism for in order to go, right, I need to understand how this is hitting or what emotional impact this is having, or if it just sounds the way I want it to sound? How do you go about improving, and how do you go about emphasizing aspects that you want to emphasize and eliminating aspects that you don't want to emphasize quite so much?
Okay, so I will set, the best way to explain that is I'll set a level in my head, like in my own head. I don't play my stuff, which is, I don't want people to hear this and not do this, because it's actually a good thing to, when you're creating, play it to some people you trust their ears, or if it's a video, show them the edit, you know, trust their, but usually that'll only be a small circle of people I trust to use their ears. But sometimes you've got to be very careful with it. So life is like, you know, most of my friends I play it to, you'll get genuine feedback. But if you just have them guys who are like, yeah, it's great, you know, just go with it, it's great, everything's great. But when someone says something, I've learned, I think you touched on this earlier, I've learned not to be so critical of what people say, because everyone is entitled to an actual opinion, especially if I've actually asked for the opinion. But I do set a level initially in my being the first listener. When we went back to saying earlier, I'm the first listener. I set a level in my head, and if it doesn't, where I'd say in the early years, like going back to maybe before 2007, when I gave you a mixtape and met you, there probably the level was a lot lower. So as I've kind of gone on, the level gets set higher every time. It doesn't, and sometimes that level I might think that level got to a peak where it never really goes any higher. But I think what comes with keeping making music, like the momentum, like when you do your videos, do you look at one and be like, oh, I could do that better, could ask her, you know, whatever. I think the beauty of it is that bar always getting higher, and I think that bar will always get higher the more you actually just create. If you just stagnant, you won't really, that bar will stay the same. That bar sometimes might even drop, in your head, and then you know. So yeah, that's really the way I do it. I have this bar in my head that, you know, for people to visualize that, it just means that there's a certain standard to what I'm doing that I will organically know if that is to my standard. And then when it goes out, I know I set my bar at a standard that is to me it's high. To someone else it might not be, but I always think if to you, like you said when you did your video, we're going to go back to your time, let me see but I'm just kind of making similarities because I believe in what's the word? I'm throwing big words out there.
No, you believe in the transferability of the thought
Yeah,
process. Creativity begets creativity in every
yeah,
field.
and
So.
the connection and the is it synergy? It's like it's the way things are synced in processes. So like when you, like you said, you didn't really the bar you had in your head for doing that video wasn't that high, but then the views were high, and yeah.
I gave the audience what they wanted, and
Gave you
you
what
know,
they wanted,
it
yeah.
wasn't what I wanted or needed, but again, that
Yeah.
was a neat lesson. It
Yeah.
teaches you again not to yell at your own audience for liking what they like, and going, hey man, you should just be grateful that you found an audience. But I want to touch on something because just a little bit of an extension of what you mentioned there, because one of the things that I do, again, not to, again, we'll try and transfer the experience a little bit here, is I will often look at not necessarily who's the best or the most popular, but I will look at methods, techniques, avenues, and say, right,
techniques,
who's got the best delivery? Who's got the best presentation? Who's got the whatever? And then I want to, right, how do you do that? And then, right, can I emulate it? Or can I adapt it? Or can I put my own spin on it? And you explore it from there. And look, sometimes this is part of the creator's path that no one wants to fucking tell you, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes it's a giant waste of time. It goes fucking nowhere. And you go, well, fuck. That was a day of my life I'll never get back. So I guess what I want to ask is, like, have you ever had those moments where you experimented and then had that war hit moment? And then, more pertinently, is there any way, are there any avenues that you do explore yourself? Like when you look at, right, how can I push myself? Who am I looking at? Who's doing what? And can I borrow some of it, or do I like any of it, or do I think I could do what they're doing but better because they're missing something?
Yeah. If I'm ever going to do that, it's definitely no disrespect to the new stuff, like, you know, like new music and new artists, but I've got to be real. If I do need a bit of that, I'll go to the old stuff, because I feel like I touched on earlier that the bar in hip hop and lyricism, it got raised to a point that it never really. Do you understand that everything in music became so much far away from that? I kind of felt that I'm not saying I'm never going to hear a rapper really inspire me again, but I do feel what comes with, like, what's the word? What comes with, like, it's even like, you know, sometimes in fashion things can 360 round, and like it just.
You're seeing that right now. The 2000s are making a motherfucking comeback, son.
That's it. To 2000, and the inspiration for, like, a new trainer that everyone loves, all these kids love. And another thing you touched on there is I'll go into this one as well, is that most of the best music, I'll give you some examples, and you might know some of this, you might not, but you know the obvious song Eminem, hi, my name is one of the first ones really that he come out with, and he got really popular. That beat, that melody,
isn't it Le Chiffre or Le Chiffre? I forget what is it, but a really, really famous sort of lounge singing style act from the 60s or 70s.
Yeah, literally 60s and 70s. That beat, that whole sound of that song was from then.
Lifted like alloys of a car, my friend. I heard that and I couldn't fucking believe how little he changed.
Honestly, I've gone through some of them where, you know, another classic example, when you were a kid, if you were from my era, and one of the biggest songs that came out of my time at middle school, probably I must have been 10, Gangsta's Paradise Trio.
Yeah, they taught that in music school, where they said, hey, listen, I'm going to play you this thing. Heard it anywhere before? And they go, no. And then they go, play the tape. And you go, no, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. But you touched on it. I'll take, there is certain rappers and artists who inspire me with that, who I might look to just to kind of get that, and they definitely will be older. Don't get me wrong, sometimes someone new might spear me with a bit of inspiration, but most times they will be older artists where I'll, you know, kind of seek out a bit of that inspiration on what they did that was great in the 90s, in like, you know, like the 2000s maybe. But yeah, I don't, but one thing you touched on as well, I don't try and so you're this way, you are better than me, Wes. I don't try and imitate, or what's a better word for imitation? Imitate, or yeah, because I don't
So
believe
the
that's
idea of
what I mean.
emulating someone else, like you see someone, you
Yeah,
go, oh
yeah,
man, wouldn't it be great if I could do that? But then the trick
yeah,
is, and this is my experience, isn't
yeah,
just to rip it off wholesale, because again, you lose that genuineness.
yeah,
You're trying to
yeah.
be someone
You
else
do. You do.
rather than what you should do, which is look, how did they do that? Right. Why did they do that? What is the effect? Right. Let me think about that. Because otherwise, you become a carbon copy, in which point, what's the
Mm,
point? The original already exists. What are you
yeah.
doing differently or better? Again, you should always ask yourself that question. So if you don't want to
Definitely.
emulate anyone, that's cool. But I guess
Mm.
then the question would become then is how do you push yourself creatively? How do you look to go right? How can I better emphasize my lyricism, better emphasize my production quality, better emphasize the way I even something as simple as the way you produce, you know, the stuff that goes with the music, i.e., videos, i.e., artwork, i.e., photography, your persona as an artist. How do you
Mm.
go about exploring and pushing those boundaries?
I think a part of it will be looking at what's, say, I hate that word relevant, but that is a specific word that's used in the music industry, because relevance is sometimes the key to the momentum as well. Is like you stay relevant, you know. And like I say, I might then look at some videos that have come out in 2023. But one thing I've realised with this as well is that it gets to a certain point in terms of music, visuals, music, that there's certain places it gets to where, in my opinion, it can't even go no better than what's already been done with music. So, like you said, then I'm not then trying to look at to push myself. Sometimes it will be just reviewing. I don't know if you go back over your own videos, but another thing I think you have to do, unfortunately, for an artist is someone might say, "What have you listened to this morning?" You got to work on, but I'm listening to my own EP from I did last month, because I'm going over it and then picking out. And as an artist, you say there is some parts of being a creative person that are not enjoyable. Not saying not enjoyable, as in like, but they're not. It's not all like everyone's sitting there just writing and not listening to their own music. Like, you will go over. Sometimes you can be your own worst enemy, because you're picking apart an old song and thinking, why did I leave that last 4 bars, which is like the end, say like the last 4 bars of your lyric. You didn't end it. You know, like when a film's got a bad ending. You know, someone's like did some lyrics, they've ended it. The ending is very specific in rap music to how you end that, to kind of wrap it up. It's like, you know, and sometimes what I've found is an own critique of mine. And one thing, this is a good answer to the question, is I found when I went back on my old stuff, I was lazy with the last bit of the lyric. And, you know, all great things have a good start, the middle, there might be a bit just in the middle, but the end, start and end, you know, films, you know, grips you in. By the time you've gripped into the film, you're watching the middle, there'll be some scenes that are rubbish. There'll be some storyline that's rubbish. But as long as the ending got what you want, and most time now films have crap shit endings, so it's like they didn't even want to do the rest of the film, and they've just come up, you know. So I feel music and lyrics and songs are the same. You've got to end well, and you've got to start well. The middle, don't get me wrong, it will carry itself once you've wrote it, but the start and the end is very specific. The digestion of music, I'm diving into a different thing now, but the digestion of music is so quick now. Someone can be 10 seconds in. It only really takes 5-10 seconds to hear a song and not like it or like it. And then this is another point you made earlier. Do I get disheartened that took me a year to make, and someone disliked it in 5 seconds? Think about the time, the opposite ends of the time is like, but you can't be, because you accept as an artist, like you might do with your videos, they're digested really quickly. No one's going today, oh, should I watch one? And then maybe tomorrow I'll watch a bit of it again, and maybe I'll like the video or the song. It doesn't happen like that. You either like it quick or you don't. Sometimes things will grow on you if you've kind of like watched them again or listened to them again. But
I think you can, as I've grown as a mature content consumer, as cringeworthy as that term is. But like, listen, I appreciate sometimes that it takes a minute to get to where you need to, or to build momentum to something. That's a thing, and I do appreciate that this generation really is. Look, this generation's, videos, music, art, dissemination of information. I can't argue with the speed of it. Like it gets to the point faster than any medium in history, which is fine, except for speed doesn't mean you're gonna hit the point, or you're going to make the point that you want to make. And one of the things that one of my remits in the content I make is whatever I'm trying to do, I should be able to communicate that, and it should, in retrospect, make everything that I've done make sense. Oh, you're trying to review a game for everybody, not just people that like games or don't like games. It's anyone could sit down and watch it and not feel lost or not feel like a fucking baby. Same with interviews. I want to sit down, I want to talk to someone like they've never seen you before, or they're your biggest fan, and I want both to enjoy it. Now, that might mean compromises. Like you say, that middle part might be a bit shaky. You might be like, but then you hook them in at the beginning, you give them a satisfying bit at the end, and it usually works itself out in the middle because it's the sensation, it's the emotion. So the question I have, this might be a hard one for you. I promise there's a softer question coming after this one.
Cool,
really nice one for you. You'll like this next question. But this is the last tough one for now, though.
Yeah.
What do you, or rather, how do you sit down and decide what you're trying to say as an artist? So do you decide it album to album, track to track, line to line? Do you get into a particular vein of a message, or do you have a different remit, a different mission statement altogether, where it's like, maybe you just want to make cool shit. Like, I remember when I started YouTube, I didn't really want to make stuff that was overly thoughtful or overly analytical or funny. I just wanted to make stuff that I thought looked and sounded cool. As stupid as that sounds.
Yeah, I think it's definitely more track to track. Definitely more track to track. I don't think a project would have been me thinking, what do I want to talk about before I've got into the creative process. I don't think that ever really happened. I just, it's more so that the what, like I said earlier, sometimes the words end up being from a consciousness that I'm actually experiencing at that moment in time, and then they just come, and then it's almost like they were meant to be. But I don't really premeditate any type of kind of choice of what am I going to talk about. Do I make a song? The only time that would have happened is if I was in the headspace of making a song that was for, say, a wider audience, because really then I have to kind of pick subjects and concepts where they're more relatable, basically. Do you understand? If I'm talking about breaking up with a partner, that subject, so to speak, will be relatable by a lot of people. I already know that. But then if I talk about, say, let's make something up. I've got a book here called Off the Map. Apparently it talks about maps that are not maps, and there's loads of places in you see what I'm saying? That might be something a lot of people won't be able to relate to if I talk about a subject off in that book. But I do feel a part of hip hop was about provoking the mind and the desire to find out knowledge. You know what I mean? So it was like, like you said, when it comes to maybe a specific lyric, the way it's get put together, and I think I'll go back to the word anecdote of this, is that there is a little bit that I like doing in my writing of someone left to work it out. Like a movie and someone goes, I didn't get it. And someone goes, oh, well, you had to work it out. It wasn't one of them movies. Right. This is not She's All That. This is, Interstellar, so to speak. You could watch that and be like, someone could get to the end of that movie and be like, what the hell? But then someone could get so thought-provoked that they wanted to go and research what that film meant. But someone might think, do I care about who them people are? Not really, because I think I had a lyric on my last EP where I said, if I wrote the bar, that if it was for the listener, then they were listening. If that makes sense. So if it got to someone who needed to hear it, then it was probably right that I wrote it that way.
Yeah, hence the phrase that it spoke to me as a turn of
Yeah,
phrase.
yeah,
That makes
that's
sense.
it, exactly that. That's a great phrase to sum it up. It spoke to me because it doesn't speak to everyone, but that one spoke to me. You can walk through an art gallery and goes, that one there, and someone's like, why? It's, and I think that is part of being a beautiful part about being into art, is that it doesn't always speak to people in the same way. And if you
Indeed.
can
Well,
interpret different things,
there's a famous saying that says that art should challenge the artist as much as it challenges the as the observer, because the point of art isn't necessarily to entertain or invoke emotion. It's really just to challenge you. It's meant to give you something to ponder, and you don't have to
yeah,
like it, you don't have to enjoy it. It can still give you something, and that's what I've always found fascinating about music and the pursuit of something artistically edifying. But
and just to touch, yeah.
go by
I
all
was
means, shoot.
just saying, just to touch on the last bit of it, is this might be for other people watching the video who are in the same scenario, and they might be younger than me and starting out and debating what do they write about, or do they write that song about people, on their street doing a madness, and they don't see that just because that's the song that's got loads of views. And I think, yeah, you've got to realise, if someone told me I would have substantial amounts of money through my music, but I knew for a fact that my lyrical content was influencing the youth of today in a negative way, I couldn't live with myself. Do you understand? So that is a really good way of looking at it, is that if it was influencing the youth in a negative way, and I think this comes with this is a wicked way of saying it. You know what comes with being a rapper or having a voice that people can just hear is a responsibility. And this is what hip hop music's about. It might not be in other genres, so to speak, but I do believe there's a responsibility with a voice, and it's, you understand it. You
Oh,
can't
God
be
damn it. I really want to ask
so
you a dumb
powerful.
question, but now I
Yeah,
got to
go on.
ask you about this, because this deviates a bit away from music and into just content creation in general. And I'll ask you this
Yeah,
because this would be a good thing to pose to you to sort of mull over. So I'll
yeah,
give you the context of something that I stated the other day, and you can disagree with it, agree with it, add
yeah.
your own
Go
spin to
on.
it. Are you familiar with the American stand-up comedian slash podcaster Theo Von?
Theo Von. I don't think from name I am, but
Okay,
maybe.
so he's a comedian that has kind of this generation summed up. He has a mullet. He says a lot of dumb shit for the sake of saying a lot of dumb shit, and he has people on his podcast that he knows are inherently controversial. Now, in a recent show, with controversy surrounded Roseanne Barr, who went on the show and made a comment about something approaching 6 million Jews were never murdered, and even if they were, they deserved it. Now, here's the problem with that. Not with the statement.
That
That
was the
wasn't
name of
the.
his video. Was that the?
Oh
Yeah.
no, this was just a segment of the podcast of
This
the interview.
segment.
So,
Okay.
but the
Yeah.
problem is that wasn't the context. The context was a 2-minute clip where she was clearly joking, considering she's Jewish. So the point is that that segment still gets circulated. It goes around. Everyone gets outraged, and all the rest of it calls for him to be cancelled. Now, here's where I come in. I say, I understand what he's saying, which is you're all taking it out of context. However, you're part of that sphere. You help generate that lack of content because you don't take responsibility for it. You have no editor, you have no creative control over the content once it gets into the hands of some 10-year-old kid who clips your content and sends it, and you also assume no responsibility for its quality. So, with all due respect, this lack of context is on you because you've done nothing to stand by your product. You release it and then say, it's on you. So I guess then, to your point about having the, and by the way, I appreciate that you're not familiar with that particular scenario.
No,
I
but
put
I
it
know
to you. So
exactly. How you said it, I get exactly.
anyone watching this, if you want the context of it, I will try and put the link in the description below. But the question I have for you then is, you've kind of said it there, and I want to explore that. What editorial authority or responsibility do you assume then with the stuff that you make? Is that something that you are cognizant of, or is that something that you would want to? You can never control the outcome of something. You can only control the intent. And I appreciate that that's a difficult thing to then put into practice. But how do you moderate that? Or how would you moderate that if that was, like you say, you pose a scenario? Let's say you blow up tomorrow and suddenly your music is speaking to a lot of people in a way that you don't agree with. Is that something that you would ponder?
Yeah, to give an example, that used to be a thing in music. If someone said something in their lyrics that someone said, well, do you actually do that? Or for example, let's give an example. To put it in context, if someone said in a lyric, yesterday I loaded my gun, but that person's never held a gun in their life.
Well, yeah, there's gun bars are almost ubiquitous in battle rap to the point where it's
Yeah,
like, have any of you ever seen a gun?
seen a gun.
Like,
But
no? Okay,
yeah,
fine.
and like you said, then I agree with you with what you said on that situation with the context of it, and then not only the context, but then like you say, if the person then who's created the material, so to speak, if it is a song or a podcast, you're still technically a creator of that content. Like you said, then you are then knowing that things are going to be taken out of context. So that's the same way I would look at it. If I was going to say something in a lyric where it could be taken out, it's a really good question, by the way, because no one's ever asked me this, and it's a good question. And I'll tell you why, because no one really actually knows to ask this question, because they feel that whether you put in lyrics, you think, yeah, it's okay, I'll just put that in. It's not. If I do feel like something I've said could be taken out of context, I will remove it. And I think certain times I might have done it. Like someone say, I said I was spraying with my lyrical gun. I was spraying with my lyrical gun. I blew his head off with
I will
a
lyrically
lyrical bullet.
punch you with my lyrical
Yeah,
fist, and I will lyrically
lyrical.
stab you with my
Because
lyrical knife.
even in contest, that doesn't really even make sense, because you don't get a lyrical fist or a lyrical. But yeah, I'm with you. I actually do feel that because it's just a song and lyrics, like that podcast, someone could hear that lyric of mine, and someone could only play in that segment
Right.
of my song, and then they can take it way out of context. They could see me out there and be like, what did you say? You know what I mean? Certain times I've even touched on things where like someone might feel that lyric's about them.
Right.
But I never, that's what I'm carefully doing as well, is that I can't then not put real life scenarios in my music, because I feel that is a part of what makes it good. But you have to be careful. But one thing I do always say is that with myself anyway, like I say, music, if I've usually the initial lyric will stay. I'll never rearrange a lyric to make it make sense. If I just know it shouldn't have went in there, I'll just take it out. But to be honest, because I don't write like that, I don't really face that a lot. But I have faced it. But I don't really end up getting that, because I actually premeditate a lot what I'm writing. So I wouldn't have done it anyway. But yeah, if I did go back on the lyric and think, well, that could be taken out of context, which I've got to be honest, I've touched on things in songs. This is a good another avenue to go, but I've touched on things on songs that I might have said things about, not religion in general, but a belief system in religion. Then does everyone start calling me something that you're anti this if you've said that? You understand? So,
Sure.
but I do feel it's my responsibility to make that make sense. I think you touched on this earlier with your videos. I'll make it make sense. If it is something that is, I think I really want to put it in, but it could be sensitive, then I'll make sure that it does make sense. Because if it didn't, then I'm doing myself bad for not making it make sense. And then, like you said earlier, if I'm creating that content, I have to make it make sense, because I definitely don't want it to get taken out of context. But not even for other people, because I think sometimes people can run with what they want from the videos, and they just go crazy now. Someone could tweet something, and it's like it's got, yeah. People could say what they want on the road. This is a great example. You go out there and scream, "Motherfucker, I'm gonna," all this thing, curse someone. You go and tweet that shit to something, and you probably get in more trouble tweeting it than you went on the street and doing it. You know what I mean? This is kind of like the world we live in now, is that like things that are in terms of content are very crucial for people's you've seen it, haven't you? I'm sure you've seen a few artists that have tweeted things and they get basically cancelled, is the word. You get cancelled.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, not even the cancel phase. Like, I mean, just expressing an opinion these days is difficult, because it's almost impossible to express an opinion without then having the disclaimer at the beginning that's supposed to say everything that's supposed to be already inferred, i.e., I understand this is a generalization, or I understand my opinion might not mesh with yours, or my opinions may not reflect you in the way that you would have articulated it, or just the saying, in my personal opinion, is something that drives me fucking insane. Because
My God.
who else's fucking opinion are you talking about then? Because
Yeah.
when you say in my personal opinion, as opposed to my third personal opinion, my second personal opinion, my first personal opinion, and the opinion from my neighbour who has inferred it onto me, it's
Yeah, no, I
maddening.
get exactly what you're saying then. My personal opinion means that you might have other. I get what you're saying, but it's your personal one. So
Well, I
that
guess
means
what
that
that
you've
means.
already
No, I tell you
thinking
what
about
that
it.
means. And I'm sorry
Mm.
to have to jump. This is where
Yeah.
I am starting to turn into the thing I hate the most, which is an
No, go for it.
opinionated interviewer.
No, I love this.
What that is someone's way of trying to distinguish this opinion from those of others who it might be conflated with in an attempt to try and diffuse any aggression or any interjection of that intent, like we talked about. You can't control the response, but you can control your intent, and the best way to do that is often to preface what you're about to say with the intent. But the
Yeah.
problem then becomes, how do I believe your intent? Why
Yeah.
should I believe your intent? You go, listen, man, if I can't just say something as simple as, what do I think of Tottenham? Without that then being, what do you mean by that? I'm like,
I forget you're an Arsenal guy. We both are. Oh, mate.
long suffering. And again,
Yeah.
last year, not with, it's
Well,
great. I look forward to the Money
yeah.
Olympics
Yeah.
starting this year. But anyways,
Got it.
well, no, I mean,
Calm it out.
that was going to be my question is, given the delineation of everything going on in the world, the highs, the lows, the trials and tribulations, what's going on in society and whatnot, what do you think of Tottenham?
Tottenham.
Yeah, Tottenham. What do you think of
Oh,
them?
what do I think of them?
Yeah,
Do you
what
know
do you think
what?
of them, generally speaking?
It's mad to pose that question. Me being an Arsenal guy,
I mean,
my
if
initial
you
like,
if you summed
if
it
I was
up in
around those,
a word, I mean, if you had to yell it in a crowd of people, I mean, how would you sum them up? Do you think?
to be really polite, I'd say like disappointing.
What do you think of disappointment? Spurs. Thank you. That was a more
Yeah,
articulate answer than I was expecting.
yeah.
A few moments later.
Let's go.
Talk to me about the journey then. So, talk to me about the things. Sorry, the albums that you've made, or the EPs you've made, some of the tracks that you're proud of, or just talk to me about some of the moments that you're sort of you really look back on. You're like, man, I'm not even sure how I fucking did that, but that is
Yeah,
exactly how I wanted it. So talk to me about some of those that people might not be aware of.
yeah. I'll go on not just like material. There was a certain. I think it was. God, it's hard to think what years, but there was a few years where dubstep music was really popular, and especially like MCing over dubstep music. And two friends of mine were like a duo MCs on dubstep music, so they'll get booked for sets. So what they started to do, because I'd go around to their houses a lot with spit bars, they started to invite me on the sets with them. Out of just like being a mate and saying, you know what, we've got this set, and they know I'm quite good at holding sets up, not like blowing my own trumpet, but when you've got 2 hours set and you've only got 2 MCs, it definitely helps when you've got 3 MCs, because you run out of lyrics, you're in a sweaty rave, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you can't be bothered anyway half the time, and you might, some of my friends might have had a drink and they're not feeling, like they can hold it up. So one moment I will say to you that was a crazy moment, and this probably was, I'd say, probably around about 2000 and maybe 13, 14 maybe, or maybe even before that. But I went to a car show. So do you know Sidewinder?
Oh
They
yeah,
were
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sidewinder were basically there was a shop in town that sold records, but Sidewinder were like a movement and used to put on nights in Milton Keynes. So a lot of the grime scene, if you never went and was on a Sidewinder set, so don't get me wrong, I wasn't in Milton Keynes on the Sidewinder set. That was way before my time. But I went to a car show in Bedford, and I was on stage, and this is like like you said, that moment of how did I hold this up? Because I never really prepared to go to these sets, but my friend would say to me, "You got your lyrics ready?" And I always think like, "Of course I got my lyrics ready." I would just think this is actually like if I'm going to a football game and I've bought my football boots, you know what I mean? Like I've got, my lyrics are ready. But I was at this car show and I didn't plan on going on stage and getting a lot of, limelight and da-di-da-di-da. But there was a moment I was on stage and I just didn't rehearse the lyrics, the dubstep music come on. I must have done a few lyrics where I just had the whole, and when I say it was a big room of people, there must have been a good, and for me, like I said, I've never been one to branch out there with performance-wise, but there must have been a good, I'd say, over 2,000 people in there. And to have them all literally, if I said put one hand in the air, they would. And like you say, to a moment, that was quite a moment where I proved to myself. Because I think, like when you get told, like you said earlier, you get told your content's good or your lyrics are good or you're a good performer. You don't almost believe everybody until you've gone and done it. And then you've kind of proved to yourself, like, wow, I do deserve to be on stage with the microphone. Them moments, and that was a moment for me where I realised, like going to them sets with my mate, there was other sets that were smaller clubs, like local, even still quite big crowds, but that was a moment in performance-wise where I said to myself, well, I kind of proved to myself, I was like, this, I can hold up a set with a crowd, which is very difficult as a lyrical MC, because you get like, I don't know if you ever heard the word a host MC, but they'll be more like, is everybody having a good time? Like that type of vibe, not like spitting off of the dome straight onto tunes you don't even know the DJ is going to play. So I realised I've got an art for just carrying a set. And that was a standout moment in performance-wise. In terms of material, I released a single called Not the Same. That was 2017. But let me just take back. So off of the back of chapter 1, the stuff with the anecdote authors, I think me and Ricky went through a time period of just doing loads of music that never really got out. It just was like in the bedroom. It got, to be honest, SoundCloud. You ever use SoundCloud? SoundCloud was quite popular thing then. So a lot of this music went onto SoundCloud. So anecdote authors, chapter 1. We did start chapter 2, but chapter 2 never really. We had a lack of beats at the time, and it never really formed into anything. But yeah. So from there, I did. Do you know what? I'm going to touch on this EP. I did make an EP called the Unbreakable EP, but I've got to be very real. I felt like that was a time I was experimenting a lot with sounds, and it was more of a learning curve of making a project. It was called the Unbreakable EP. But the one I would say I'm most proud of is the single I released in 2017 called Not the Same, which went out onto the Spotify. Like I say, any listeners, you can stream it if you find it. That was the one I was most proud of, Not the Same. And then basically Not the Same was a single that was on my EP, my official first Dvious Wiser EP, Words from the Wise, with like words from the Wise. Not, I played on the words from the Wise or that kind of thing, but words from the Wise. And this is a good, interesting point where you say about names. And I remember when I was doing this project, and I think I sat down with my dad, and he's like, "You've done your music then?" And he's not really someone who like listens to me much, but he goes, like we were saying earlier, he goes, "What are you gonna call it?" And I'll probably add some crazy name like no one knows, Emperine or something. It was like no one's even, that word's never even come out. So and then my dad's put me down, and this is where I do feel that it is good to get feedback, especially on names, because he goes, "What does that mean?" And I was like, then I got to explain this, like, this Emperine, and I realised sometimes you have to not dumb down names, but make people get it more. A word or name that comes with, they knew what the song was about a bit and the whole feel of it, instead of it being too out there. And I think this is a thing that we've always been guilty of as creatives sometimes. And this isn't to take away anything. It's just that in that market of commercial market, when someone says it does what it says on the tin, that sometimes is a part of why people buy and feed into products and brands, because it does what it says on the tin.
I'll say that's a unique problem with rap music, and I've interviewed a fair few battle rappers and musicians and stuff. It's almost the one of the few genres where you're actively punished for being clever, because there's nothing worse than a bar that is really intrinsic, it's got multi-layers, or it works 4, 5, 6 ways, or however many it is, and it goes over everyone's heads, and you have to go, do you not get it? Oh man, please don't make me explain it, because there's nothing worse than when no one laughs at a joke and you have to explain why it's funny.
Explain why it's funny, yeah.
So
No,
it's the
so
only
yeah.
genre of music I've ever seen that actively punishes people for that, as opposed to, again, this idea that, well, no, you're a rap fan, or you're a hip hop fan, you're a grime fan. Like, it's kind of incumbent upon you as an audience to educate yourselves, because these are guys that are going to work fucking tirelessly to give you not only that I'm the baddest man that done ever lived and I have all the money in the women. They go, no, I need to find new ways that no one has ever used to say the same thing that a lot of other people are saying. I need to say it in a way that works rhythmically, lyrically, thematically, and then I need to package it in a certain way that makes it digestible and palatable. Like, that takes a lot of work, man. And the fact is that can all come onto delivery.
Yeah. And I think you use the word clever. Is like you can be too clever for your own good. So to speak,
100%.
especially in when you're trying to brand things, and they just don't get it. A lot of branding is very simple.
You're talking to a guy called the Halcyon Show, and I have never met a person yet that didn't go, so what does that mean? You fucks. I promise you it's a word. I didn't make it up.
But what I love is that, it just screams at me that you're one of them, like myself in loads of ways with my music, is someone who's gone with something that you really, even though you might have even known what you do now about name specific and, kind of using a name that people get more. It's just that I can just imagine you with, like, at the time you were like, what a wicked name.
Dude, I've told the story before, but go on. No, sorry. What I was going to say was, look, I did pick the name on purpose. I thought everyone's angry on YouTube. I don't want to be angry. What's a way of saying that? Halcyon, to go back to a time of peace and serenity. That's what it means. Now, like you said, if I had any fucking brains, I would have started way back when with the chats out of his ass show. And people would get it instantly. Now, it wouldn't sound as nice, but it would do what it says on the tin.
Do what it says on the tin, and that's, at the end of the day, it is what it is. I think if you've done that once, next time you might do it again.
Sure.
You might rename something again. So I think if it's not something you keep doing, I think, because once someone's asked you, what does that mean? You've already kind of realised, this was a YouTube, or this was a song. Like I say, I've done it, so don't think you're alone. One, because so many people have done it, and like I say, we think out the box more than to the point that no one even finds a box, let alone thinks outside of it. But yeah, it is just that, when we live in this world where, like, people need to know what it means. Definitely in this day and age. They don't have
a lot of time.
I do think I just didn't even know what it really meant until you said it then. So I do think you've got to start really putting that. Do you know what the thing? Once you've run with it for so long, even like I say, I know you said you weren't going to ask me my name, but Dvious Wiser, I always felt like Wiser by itself, or D Wise, which I used to go with, didn't have enough. And I always felt a double barrel name would be more specific to me. And to this day, taking the E out of Devious, you never type in my name without that E and find anybody else. You will find all of me on the internet if you type my name specifically. So I did have a bit of a marketing brain on when I did come up with it, but don't put the E in it, because I remember old drum and bass MCs, this guy's called Devious, this guy's called Wiser. So, but I always wanted that as well, that type of oxymoron to a name, where, like, you'd really say, like, the humble Wiser, but it was like Devious Wiser. It's like you haven't gone the right route to be wise. It's like you've deviated and got wise.
No, I like that.
Which I do think wisdom is not always from sitting down with scholars and some really wise people. It sometimes is from making mistakes and being, deviating from paths that people are not on. So there you go. Without you asking me that question, I literally answered why my name was called Dvious. But I probably didn't think about it that much at the time, but I do feel like these things, like in synergy, it was always meant to be anyway, because I always call myself the Wiser, which was like a ring to it, the wise one. You could use the D instead of say the. You get it, like the wise, D wise.
No, man, it makes perfect sense. And I think even when people don't think they give it thought, everything from a creative standpoint is an existential expression of someone, even if they don't always think about it initially. But it's funny how things people are poems, and often they appear more symmetrical in hindsight than we gave them credit for in the moment. But let's bring it back to you, because as we draw this interview to a close, let me ask you, what have you got that you're really excited about? What have you made recently that you're really excited about? And like, what do you want people to be aware of that you are maybe not like you've got to fruition, but that you are actively trying to produce?
Yeah, so at the minute, you know what, it was a bit of a headache with the last EP I created. Not in terms of the creativeness, but, and this will be good to put on your channel actually, because I can direct people where to hear it, and it's not on the Spotify and the Apple Music, which usually is where my music ends up going, because I do get it to a distributor and get it out, so you know you can go on all the platforms people go on and listen to it. So the last projects I did, and this project's only come out now, do you know what, the date's almost gone because it didn't officially get released, but it was about a month ago I released the EP. You know what, let's just get the cover. I've got it on my wall here, probably can't see that too well. It's because I got this blurred background.
There it is. No, there it was. There.
Basically, the title here is called Purple Sky. So basically, this EP, I've got to be honest, I believe this EP, this is just a laminated thing I printed out, by the way, but this is the cover art. You can go on YouTube, so if you just go to YouTube, type in Dvious Wiser, you'll find this EP, and I've got to be real with you. Like I say, I'm not on trying to big it up because I know I'm on your show now and I feel like it's the latest. You know, it's always like the latest thing they've always done is the best. This, I feel, was the best EP in terms of content, production, taking it back to that hip hop sound, which now is like gold dust to even find these type of beats I made. So this project, 6 tracks, was on it. It's like an intro. It's almost like, you know, like we go back to hip hop in the 90s and even, you know, probably some of the early 2000s, is that the albums were like a movie. It was like the interludes, the intro, the middle, the ending was so specific. It was like you listen to an album like you were watching a movie. And this is what I did with this EP. So this EP, I've got to say, other than that, Words from the Wise, which I touched on earlier, is the proudest moment because it was the first one. You know, like you might go back to your first video and or whatever. There's that kind of thing you say, but there's something like that. It was the first one, so it was like you see the progression. You always appreciate that first one you did, which I do. The music on there is great, but the music on this one, I feel like if at my age, and when I say I evolved as I've aged as a person. Well, I hate to tell myself I age. I try and tell myself I don't age. The things I said around me stay younger. But I've evolved, and the music evolved to the point now where I know exactly what I want to give to people on projects, and that's a good thing because I feel like it's this. Like I say, this EP for me, I've got to be the proudest of this one because the sound is just the sound of. You know, like you said, when I've not only have I enjoyed it, but when I played this to certain friends, they were like, you know, and like I say, I hate to listen to them too much. They're like, make everything like this, you know, quickly. And I always know in that response, you gave them something special when they're quick to go, nah, this. It's that response that you think. You didn't even have to say a lot. I can tell by the face, like, or when they've listened to it, they're like, that EP. So yeah, that's what you can go and find now. And because of when I said headache, what one thing I'll put to the listeners, and this is a good tip for people who are producing and using a lot of sample-based software and websites where you pay a subscription, you get access. You know, like royalty-free music, you might have used it in a video where you access this. And then when you put your content out, like YouTube now, everything is so, if you put something out, it won't let it pass unless it's like copyrighted. So one thing I will say is make sure the samples, because what I faced with this EP, why I couldn't get it out properly, is because I paid for a subscription to use these samples, but people have used the same samples and released their music already with them. That's not a problem because, like we said, there's loads of hip hop beats out there that are the same. Reggae music gets rinsed the same beat can get used by 7 artists, 7 different songs, same beat. It happens. Same sample, different beat, whatever. But yeah, that's why that didn't get on platforms. But I've got to say, this is the most proudest. And coming soon, on your question about what's coming, I've already made 2 tracks to a second EP. I did actually make a whole nother EP, But then because of the problem with the samples, I've had to. This is like you say, the pain of an artist. I've had to rewrite. I've had not rewrite. I've had to re-record 2 massive songs that I had on there, and reconstruct the beat around the song that I've already wrote, which is very difficult for an artist. But I managed to do it. So I'm in the process now of getting a new EP, which probably will surface around maybe what are we in now? July, maybe autumn time, maybe. Yeah, maybe November. I always like to release a project near my birthday. My birthday's in November, so it's like I love releasing project in November. So look out for November. I'll have a project for you. Look out for some anecdote author stuff as well. Me and Ricky, we don't always get to make music because we don't make as much, but we do put out onto the YouTube and my YouTube channel. Like I say, everything is Dvious Wiser. If you just leave out the E in Dvious, you'll find me on Spotify, Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. I came off Twitter ages ago. I just got lost. I couldn't be bothered anymore with Twitter. There's too many different worlds, and I just This is what you think about. You know, sometimes when I had Twitter, I don't know if you ever get this, but I was, like we say, I was like premeditating tweets in my day in my head, and I realised what am I doing? Like so much.
I have no idea what you're talking about there. Like, fuck, he's on to me.
Yeah.
Shit.
But sometimes, bro, you and Aston Sport. The only wicked time. This is great for show. Ian Wright was on getting stick for. There was some incident in the Premier League where someone was it Rio or John Terry? You know, like someone said something that inappropriately on the football pitch that got put in like a racial term, and Ian Wright was on the radio at the time, and some people were attacking him about what he said in the situation, and whatever I tweeted, he tweeted me back. And you know, like Ian Wright, like childhood Arsenal legend, he tweeted me back and he just wrote 4 words. He put, "I like your style." And that was good. You know, like I'll retire off Twitter for the rest of my life with that one from Ian Wright. But yeah, I'm not on Twitter. But yeah, all the other platforms you can find me. And if I'm honest, anyone who wants to go follow music, I don't really need I hate being this guy, but just listen. And if you listen and don't even tell me, that's enough. Listen. Just give it a listen. You don't have to listen again. Listen once. Listen for 10 seconds. If you gave my music a listen, that's always enough for me. It's enough for me to make it anyway, because like we said earlier, it's a sense for me to make. So, and then, just have a listen to it. Add it to your playlist, whatever you're going to do with it. But just listen. That's usually what I say before I drop it. Like, listen.
I like how I didn't do an intro for the man, and now he's robbed me of my outro too. Like, you're gonna leave me anything to do here? Like, am I even fucking required on this show?
I feel like part 2 is going to be even more wicked than part 1 because we've got so much to talk about, and we need to just conversate for ages. So awesome.
Here's a promise that I'm going to try and make to you and to everyone watching through the interwebs or whatever the devil you're calling it these days. I will do everything I can to make Mr. Wiser here the first ever live, in-person, in-studio guest, but only under the promise that the production meets the expectation for the first ever live guest. That means HD quality video, HD quality audio, and a setting that will make you wet your pants with jealousy at how beautiful fucking it looks. So that's to come. We'll put that in the old calendar. But for now, at least, listen, I don't know if anyone else has listened to this, has felt. So I don't think I've interviewed someone that gave the level of insight into the artistry side of making music as you have. So for just someone who doesn't make music, it's been fascinating listening to you, how you've articulated it, having had such a career, and how you're still hungry to put out more stuff, and you're still excited and enthusiastic about how it's coming together, and you still stand by it with a pride that I really admire. So on behalf of everyone that's watched this, fucking thank you. I'll probably see you because, again, spoiler alert, we're actually good. We're mates. I don't live far away from him, so I'll probably bump into it. So, there's not much Hollywood in this moment where I say bye, because it's going to be like, all right, cool, see you at the pub later. Again, seeing as you've done everything for me in this interview, I will let you sign off in a way that is bombastic, fucking energetic, YouTube, showbiz. Sell the people.
Listen, Pat, look, not only I want to say I appreciate that, because when we do sit down proper, I do feel like your subscribers must be like excited to see where your channel's going, And like I say, if anyone who subscribed to this channel from the start, you know, don't think it's not going to go places like you're saying is going to be. And like I say, content wise, I don't think you're ever going to get anything more out of other channels than this one. I'm just going to say it. But in terms of what we live in this era, like we say, visually, you'll be amazed. It will be crazy. But and look forward to part 2 coming.
I'm just worried, man. The camera
Proper
adds 10
outros, man.
pounds, and I can't afford to put on more weight. Like that's not good. But for now, my friend, thank you so much for joining. I'm
Anyways,
gonna
thank you for having me on.
I'm gonna I'm gonna look forward to the next one. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, definitely.